My boyfriend Ralph and I often go into nature when we want to get away from everything. When we met, I was an avid hiker and he was a zipline instructor. It had been a couple years since our daughter was born, and we finally decided to use my January birthday as an excuse to take a step back and visit nature during a time it wasn't likely to be busy. Neither of us minded winter hiking and relished the thought of being snowed in together. So, we packed up and headed to Tigard Lake, West Virginia. We spent a small bit of time prior to check-in playing around the half-frozen lake and running to Walmart for snacks, cheap beer, and playing cards before the incoming snow prevented us from doing so. The snow had begun to come down in big, soft clumps. As we made our way back to the lodge, I exchanged a glance with him, both of us grinning like school children. We carried in the things we bought and began to put them away while I texted back and forth with my mom about the weather. Knowing our daughter was safe and sound sipping Coca-Cola at Grandma's made me more excited to enjoy the opportunity to explore. Once the bears were chilling and the snacks had found their way into the table, we headed to the small restaurant in the lodge. I picked us a table next to a giant window overlooking the lake so we could watch the snow fall at sunset with our dinner. "We should go for a walk after this," I gestured outside with a French fry. Ralph leans back dramatically and pats his stomach. "Okay, but I'm taking a beer with me." We pay for our food and take the leftovers back to the room, savoring every second of quiet. Each of us grabs some warm layers. Ralph comes up behind me and slides a beer into my hand, kissing my fingers. Ding! My phone went off in my pocket. A text from Mom, with a picture of a sleeping child. It was so nice to know that she had a full and relaxing day as well. I realized I was just standing there, smiling at my phone, and turned to show him the picture. He's no longer behind me. I look to the door, and I see him just beyond the threshold, looking toward the road. Confused, I threw my phone back into my pocket and followed him out the door. The snow had forced a pocket of stillness over the area. Stepping outside was like stepping into a void. The parking lot and surrounding area were pitch black. So quiet. All you could hear was our boots crunching on the fresh snow. Making our way down the road, he comments quietly how the snowfall has made everything eerie quiet. Ding. We both chuckle at the irony of the obnoxious noise, but his laugh sound forced. I pull my phone from my pocket and notice it's just the alert for the battery. I show Ralph the alert, illuminating his smile with my phone screen. But as I pull the phone away, I feel my heart jump into my throat. There was something wrong with his face. He was looking past me, his smile feigned and lifeless. I tried to swallow my panic, stretching my hands over my head and yawning. What's wrong with him? He put his hands in his pockets stiffly and began to walk in the direction we had been, away from the lodge. My heart started pounding as the darkness of the woods that lingered just past the shoulder of the road started to feel suffocating. "Hey, let's head back. It's way colder out than I thought." I take a tentative step back towards the building. "No." His voice was firm and threatening, nothing like I had grown accustomed to. My golden retriever gamer boy turned, gruff. I tried to make my voice as playful as possible. "Well, you can freeze on your own then." With every ounce of courage I had, I turned my back on him, making determined steps towards the lodge. Ding. I felt his eyes on me. I could hear the slow footsteps following casually behind me. My phone. I'd forgotten my phone was dying. Maybe I could casually call my mom on the way back. Maybe I was overreacting and just feeling freaked out by the darkness and quiet. But his face, his smile seemed as though it was slipping down. His eyes had pinpoints for pupils. I could feel them. Him. roughly 10 feet behind me, every step sending pin prickles all over my body. I pulled up my phone, and what was on my screen sent a chill to my core. A text from Ralph. "Where did you go?" "I went to the bathroom, and you just ditched me in the room." I stared at the phone, feeling my dinner threatening to make a return appearance. Willing my feet to move faster than a casual walk, to run, I could still feel it looking at me. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me, breaking to a sprint. For context, I am a professional wilderness explorer. Since I was young, my passion had been geared towards the wilderness. I have hiked on rough terrain in many countries. I know the wilderness like it was my own precious child. I research what specific wildlife lives in the area before I go hiking, so I know what to be prepared for. That's what makes this whole ordeal even more terrifying. One day, while browsing through a travel site for West Virginia, I saw a pop-up for a specific mountain trail. Again, nothing seemed out of the ordinary while researching, and it really seemed like the ideal hiking spot, leading up to a beautiful view showing a gorgeous blue lake. When researching the trail, it was mentioned that the area was very isolated, with the nearest town being 123 miles away. It seemed very enticing. Of course, it had the normal flora and fauna of the region, and didn't seem odd. It did mention not to disturb the wildlife, and to watch where you step because of many footholds that would break away and cause you to fall down the cliffside. Overall, it's just a normal mountain trail. I spent about a month preparing for this trip. I made sure to contact everyone I knew so they would know where I was in case it went missing. I then drove there and started my hike. Once I got there, I relished at the beauty of it all. The start of the trail had a view of many peaks staring down at you, and I thought to myself how the view looked like a giant god towering over the world. I then started on the trail. At first, everything was fine. It was your typical mountain trail. I made sure I took a break every 15 minutes or so I didn't overwork myself and have to call it quits. It was around my 5th break that things started to seem off. The birds had stopped singing, and I couldn't hear the chattering of insects. I didn't even hear the wind blowing through the trees. It was as if everything had vanished. After about 5 minutes, I started on the hike again. I was a little nervous and on edge, though, because I was the loudest there. It felt wrong. As though I was being watched, stared down by a malevolent force, playing with me. I continued, until around break number 20. I stopped, getting out my bottle of water, as I had done multiple times before. But as I was putting the bottle on my lips, I realized something was off. I heard twigs snapping, about 10 feet behind me. I threw my water bottle down and turned around to see what I heard. I can't describe exactly what I saw. This is a bit too difficult. The creature I saw vaguely humanoid, bipedal, with pale, pasty-like skin. Its face, though, was certainly not. It had eyes that I can only describe as being too big to fit its face. Its face, though small, still surrounded the eyes. But I swear its eyes were too big. The creature's mouth was indescribable, but I think the closest I could use for you to picture it would be to say that it was somewhere between a human and a dog mouth, with 5 layers of knife-like teeth. Its hands were freakishly large, about the size of my arm, with long, skinny fingers to match. About the rest of it, I can't really describe. It was sort of a blur, almost hard to see. That's all I can remember about its lower half. I stood still, staring at the thing. It hadn't noticed me yet, but it wouldn't be long before it did. It was then that I started to sneeze, and then the creature really noticed me. It turned its head around slowly. looked at me directly in the eyes, and started to charge at me. I turned around and I ran. I ran as fast as my legs could take me. I ran and I ran and I ran until I finally made it to my car and slammed the door shut and drove away. I still have no idea what that thing was, but I'm just grateful that I lived to fight another day. A couple years ago, I decided to go hiking, and trust me, I deeply regret that. Now, this is pretty common here, since I'm from Canada, but after getting all my equipment ready, I realized it had already been 5 p.m., so the sun was starting to go down, which caused the people I was going with to cancel their plans and schedule them for the next day. But I really wanted to go, so I decided to go solo. After around an hour under the rising moon, I was walking through some trails in a deep forest when I suddenly heard a sound of a slash and liquid dripping. I didn't think anything of it, because I thought it was most likely an animal trying to get some food. After some time walking, I drifted off into the forest, and I completely lost my way back. So I tried to find a small clearing to put down my backpack and pull out my flashlight, but it was pretty dark, but not exactly pitch black. Under the moonlight revealed itself a small area with rocks I could use to pull out my tools, and so I relied on my luck and put down my backpack whilst hoping whatever was out there growling wouldn't hear me. And I pulled out my flashlight. After putting my backpack on, I turned on my flashlight and tried to use it as a way to find my way around and maybe find a way out. But there were footsteps forming a circle around where I was, and they were too big to be human. I immediately got freaked out and pulled up my flashlight. I looked left and right. Nothing. I immediately turned on my back. And wait, the tree there had big claw marks. They were far too big to be of any average animal. This really creeped me out, and I already knew I wasn't the only thing in the midst of that forest. So looking at the thick trees stretching for miles, I walked in a random direction, and I heard branches snapping all around me. I knew they were snapping way too fast to be human, so I knew I wasn't being stalked by some psycho killer. But I knew there was something out there, and I was mostly scared of coyotes, if anything. So I kept walking, and then I stopped for a second to look at the moon, because I was trying to make out the time, but my watch died. Huh, strange. That never happened before, I told myself. But as soon as I looked into the moon, the sound of a growl broke then the complete silence before I saw a big furry thing jump on me, and it slashed my hand off and tore my backpack as well as everything in it before running into the dark of the night. As blood was dripping, I used some extra clothes I had brought to put pressure on the blood. As it was dripping, seeing my own hand next to me, but not connected to my body, was terrifying. And surprisingly, there was no pain. I then got up and grabbed my flashlight and continued to walk, but I noticed I had better stamina. I felt active, and I could see very well, rendering my flashlight useless. I was wondering why, because it was already night by the time this happened. So I kept walking thinking nothing of it. But then, suddenly, I passed out. I remember waking up, and this time I felt my hand, and it really hurt. I felt warm, painful throbbing that wouldn't go away. I had to get out of the forest, and I had to get help, fast. I was losing a lot of blood, and I knew it wouldn't be long before I passed out again, and this time, I wasn't sure if I would wake up. I pushed myself to get to my feet, and mustered up enough strength to run. I pushed my way through the hard branches and leaves with blood spraying everywhere, even though I was still applying pressure to the wound. I finally made it to a clearing, and I could see the road. I kept going, but just before I could touch the road, I tripped and I fell over. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed with 2 doctors looking over me. They told me I was attacked by a bear, and I was lucky to have survived due to the amount of blood I lost. The doctor told me it was a miracle that you were able to find the road when you did, because as you did, a car was driving by in the nick of time and saved you, driving you straight to the hospital. I didn't know what to say. I was still shocked, but I knew that was the last time I would never go hiking again.